So the question is, how do you take your idea? How do you take your innovation, your invention potentially to market? And I thought I might give you just an example that relates to everybody in this room, presumably. And it's this. I assume we all have one somewhere, one or more somewhere on our body today. It's a fantastic invention, right? Nobody would disagree that there was a technological revolution that happened when somebody figured out how to put clothing together in a different kind of way than buttons or snaps or holding your hands or sewing things together. So let me just give you the quick history of this business opportunity, this invention. Started in 1851 with a guy named Elias Howe. He was also connected to several other inventions at the time. And Elias Howe, no doubt, if there were a Geek Camp in 1851, he'd have been there, he'd have organized a team, he'd have said, I've got the most fabulous invention mankind has ever seen, wait till you see this thing. And he got a patent for it. And he started to organize resources around this venture idea. About 42 years later, by the way, Elias Howe, long since gone, never made $1 on this invention. It never hit the market and had any customers. 42 years later, another guy comes along and improves on that invention. And now he's in Geek Camp in 1893. And he's got a team. And he said, yeah, we got all that stuff from Elias Howe, but he didn't quite get it right. Wait till you see my new invention, my tweak, my hack on the zipper. Nothing happened. 9 years later, somebody else comes along. Nobody's made any money yet. We're now, 51 years after the invention of the zipper. Now we're 58 years. Now we're 62 years from the invention of the zipper, and nobody's made a penny on this invention yet. Fabulous opportunity, great product. No question that it could revolutionize the world, but nobody's made a dime. Add another year, 1914, congratulations. Somebody figured out a way to convert that product into a business opportunity and started making a very small amount of money on the zipper. It took another X number of years before somebody finally figured out, hey, maybe the problem is the name. So why don't we come up with a brand name here that might convey the fact that this is fast and simple. A zipper, great. 1921, almost 3 generations after the invention of the zipper. 1937, somebody finally be able to say, well, wait a second, this isn't just for zipping together rubber galoshes. It could be helpful to men. Best thing to ever hit pants, presumably. It might be helpful in clothing. Now, suddenly, people started to make money, 85 years later. This is about timing. This is about figuring out whether your invention, your idea that you're working on now, that you've been working on for weeks and months, what you're going to be working on intensively over the course of the next week, whether the market is right, whether it's timing, whether there is demand, whether customers are willing to pay for the solution that you're working to bring them. The zipper is a great example of something that was a wonderful product, a great technology, an invention, but hadn't yet ripened into a business opportunity or an entrepreneurial venture. So beware falling in love with your product too soon and staying in love with your product too long without getting feedback, without getting some indication from customers as to whether or not they agree with you that this is going to help their lives. So you don't want to wait 85 years, right? You want to start making money next month, next 6 months. So let's try this on for size, because this is something else that I suspect you have. How many people are carrying something like, let me see if I've got it in my pocket here. How many people are carrying something like this? An iPhone, an iPad, something like this. Most of you, right? All right. Fantastic. Let's use this as an example. So here we are. You've got an iPhone. How many people camped out in line at the Apple Store the first day that it was for sale? One person here. Anybody else? Another person here. You loved it, didn't you? You loved standing in line. You loved being the first person in your group. You bragged about it. You went home. You told your girlfriend. You told your team, wait till you see what I've got. You're not going to believe it. You believe Steve Jobs. You believe Steve Jobs in his mock black turtleneck saying this is going to change the world and I want to be the first one that owns it, right? You're an innovator. Congratulations. How many people bought their iPhone within, let's say, the first 3 or 4 weeks after its introduction? You didn't want to wait in line, but you wanted to get this thing while it was pretty new. How many people did that? A few more. A few more. Congratulations. You guys are early adopters. What you share in common with the fellow that stood in line is you're buying on the promise. You're buying the promise that this thing can be as great as Steve Jobs said it was going to be. And you, too, like the feeling that you're sort of the first in your group to do this, to own this thing. Now, how many of you bought your iPhones, let's say, 2 or 3 months after it came out, so that you'd had a chance to read the reviews, you'd talk to these early folks that, were talking about it and how, it certainly looks great, but it doesn't necessarily make phone calls the way you might think about. It has great looks and everything. How many people waited, say, 3 or 4 months before you bought your? So more people. You folks are what's known as the early majority. And then I assume there must be people out here who bought their iPhone maybe 6 months or more after it came out, even while the press might be saying that there's a new model just about to happen 2 or 3 months from now. So what's going on here? What's going on here is a phenomenon that every team here needs to understand. It's called innovation diffusion. It's the difficulty of getting people to buy your product, to try your product, and more importantly, the difficulty of confusing the early people who bought the promise of your product. We have several people here. Those are folks that engineers love because they validate your ideas. They validate your features. But they're not the major market. The major market are all the people whose hands haven't yet gone up, whose hands they're waiting in the wings before they buy this new innovation. So you want a complicated chart? Here's what it is. This takes a look at about 30 different technologies over the last 100 years. And it basically says, how long did it take those technologies to reach penetration in their particular markets? Telephone took 80 years, something in that regard. If you look over in this part of the chart on the sidebar, you'll see what's beginning to happen now. The innovation diffusion curve is getting compressed. Because what's happening here is that innovation is about change. Innovation is about change. Change is tough. How many people have had New Year's resolutions this year? How many people had New Year's resolutions? You either wanted to read more, you wanted to be a better partner, you wanted to be sexier, you wanted to lose weight, you wanted to fulfill some dream that you had. A lot of us have been in that situation. How's that going for you? It's pretty tough, isn't it? It's pretty tough even to change yourself when you want to change yourself. Imagine how difficult it is to convince somebody else to change in the way you want them to change, to buy a product or to try your solution. So here's what's happening. About 2.5% of many markets are these innovators. That's the person who raised his hand initially. About another 13.5% are these early adopters. When you get to about 50%, you're at the early majority. You might get to the late majority. Maybe you get to the laggards. Who are the laggards? Those people who are buying last year's model because they could get a deal on it, or they got a handed-down model. If you want this in cartoon form, here's another way to think about the innovation diffusion curve. You want to see models of innovation, examples of where different products are on this innovation diffusion curve? Here are some for you to look at. And by the way, you'll have copies of all this later through Marcelo. Who's your competition in your business? Right there. Every business here has one major competitor, and that's the status quo. I don't care what business you're in. I don't care what product you're offering, what market you're going after, what your strategy is, what your team is, how good your technology is. You are facing one gigantic competitor, the status quo. You're facing it both internally, because to some extent the status quo separates you by saying, well, who's going to be an entrepreneur? Well, that's somebody else's job. Who's going to basically innovate in this market? Somebody else can do that. You've got to get past, you and your team have to get past status quo internally to say that we can do this. We can try this. If it's not us, who's going to do it? Your customers are asking a different kind of problem. They face the status quo around, they like what's familiar. They don't need your product. They're getting by just fine without your solution, without your product, your technology, your service. They may not care about it. They may not be willing to pay to solve it. They may not know about it. They're doing just fine. You've got to basically get them on the other side to try something new, to try something that they're not familiar with, to convince them that it's worth changing their particular status quo. For those of you that are selling into businesses, here's the way most businesses react to innovation. Innovation comes knocking at their door, right? Yeah, we've got this fabulous new thing. It's going to change how you do business. It's going to make you more effective. It's going to make you more profitable. It's going to grow market share. But you know how most organizations respond to that? Very simply. They basically say, thanks for that idea, but you know, no thanks. No thanks. I don't like it. I don't understand it. It wasn't invented here. Come back when you've got somebody else in my industry that's using it. It's a reaction of a closed door in your face. If you want to get an MBA in the United States, you got to know this acronym. And I'll leave it to somebody to translate it into Spanish, but WIFM. What's in it for me? That's what your customers are asking. That is what your customers are asking. They may not ask it explicitly, but they're asking you to tell them why I should change, why I should try this thing, why I should buy it, why it's better than my other alternatives. What's in it for me? That's not an invitation for selfishness. It's just an invitation to basically help you translate what you're offering in terms that matter to your customers. Answer that question, and you're going a long way towards getting your sales to the other side of these early adopters and these innovators to where the market really rests. Imagine your team is in that black box. Every team here is in a black box. What's in that black box? Black box is filled with assumptions, assertions, hopes, and dreams. That's what you guys talk about. You're excited about what you're doing. You think you've got the best new thing in the world. It's fantastic. Wait till the world hears about it. The difficulty is that most of the wisdom in the world lies outside your team. The sooner you get out, the sooner you talk with customers, the sooner you get other opinions about your idea, your product, your dream, the better off you're going to be. And if you're writing a business plan or you're presenting a business strategy, most people know that a business plan is a piece of fiction. It's filled with lies, with assumptions, with wild-ass assertions, with impossible projections. Yeah, it's going to take you half as much time. Yeah, you're going to do this in 5 times faster than anybody's ever done it. That's not going to happen. Your team is what's going to matter. That's what you've got to do. So let me wrap up with some suggestions. Imagine for the moment that you are facing a keyboard. And the keyboard is filled with some of those technology and web-based resources that I mentioned earlier. And they're available to you for free in most cases. They may have to do with helping you shape your idea, helping you develop your marketing strategy, helping you figure out what your product is, helping you figure out what your team needs to look like, who your suppliers need to be, what your launch strategy is, what your business model is. Think of it like a new kind of keyboard that can open up the potential of your idea, the potential of entrepreneurship, the power of entrepreneurship. Just like the keyboard that you're using today can open up information and ideas and colleagues all over the world. That's what you can do today. Whether you're searching for a business model, this happens to be Alexander Osterwalder's business model that some of you may be familiar with using the business model strategy, business model canvas. But there's another analogy that I wanted to leave you with, because this business model issue isn't as complicated as you sometimes think about it. How many folks have played with this? Everybody? How many people have solved it? Yeah, I always know that. Don't you hate those people? I mean, you can't stand it. Well, here's a way to think about business models. This is the most popular toy in history, right? More people have played this thing than any other toy. One way to think about business models is to focus not on the complexity on the outside of these things, right? Because it doesn't take very many turns before this thing has gotten hopelessly complicated. Billions, trillions of permutations and combinations, right? Just like all the variety of business models that you see out in the world today. But if you take this particular thing apart, on the inside of this toy, here, catch. On the inside of this toy, you will find the magic. And the magic is this little 6-sprocket universal joint. And I like to use it because it suggests that if you can answer these 6 questions, you'll be able to configure a business model that may work for your particular industry. 1, what product and service are you really offering? Now, I'll warn you, these are simple questions. Look at that, he solved it in about 10 seconds. You can have that one back, it's yours as a souvenir. So, these are questions that are simple to ask. If you think you have an answer, come back tomorrow. Come back the next day. Come back the next week and ask them again and again and again and again. What product and service are you offering? You might want to, by the way, ask every team to answer these questions independently of one another and see whether or not they agree. 2, who's going to buy this and why are they going to buy it from you? Who is going to buy this and why are they going to buy it from you? That has to do with customer segmentation and product differentiation. Remember that phrase, different is better? That's what this one's about. 3rd, where are you going to position yourself in this market or value chain? That's about positioning. Are you going to be at the high end of the market, low end of the market, high priced, low priced, multi-feature, simple feature? You're going to be a solution, a product, a service? What are you going to do? Where are you going to position yourself? How are you going to manage? How are you going to organize? What's the culture of your organization going to be? And if you think that doesn't matter, think about the difference between how Apple approaches innovation and entrepreneurship as opposed to how Google does it. Completely different cultures to get to phenomenal returns, but very different places to work, very different kinds of cultures. You have an opportunity to shape the culture of your business in the same way. 5th, how much revenue and profit are you going to make with this thing? And notice it's got 2 parts there. It's not just profitability, it's also growth. What are the margins that are likely in this business? And are you putting a business into a cul-de-sac or are you putting it into a fast-growing, large-scale market? And last, and here's the question that every .com casualty of the first web explosion on the market wished they would have asked and didn't ask. And that is, how long will this particular model last and be able to sustain itself? Because competitors are going to copy what you do. They're going to learn from what you do. Can your business model survive that kind of competitive reaction? Does it have the resilience? Can it gracefully fail to learn from the mistakes you've made, to learn from those failures that you've made? Focus on these 6 questions for your business model. Ask them over and over again. Be willing to try some. Be willing to argue about it. Fight about it. Because your first answers are likely to be wrong answers. Your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th answers may be wrong. Keep asking these questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, John. So, wait a second, John. I would like to know if somebody has... Let's do 3 questions top, okay? All right? Somebody? Come on, don't be shy. I cannot believe we have John Donner here and nobody has a question. Unfortunately. All right, here we go. There you go, he broke the ice. What do you think about early monetization? Revenue streams. What do you think about early monetization?
I love it.
Early monetization? No monetization can be early.
There you go.
You know, what are you trying to do in business, right? You want to hear one magic sound as soon as you possibly can. That magic sound is the sound of your virtual or real cash register, right? Everything else is secondary. You've got to figure out a way that demonstrates that your customers, whoever they may be, are actually willing to change their status quo, to part with their money to buy what you have to offer. That's what it's all about. So I don't know of any venture that would want to postpone monetization. You may want to postpone launch for different reasons. You may not have your act together, blah, blah, blah. But once you're ready to go to market, go for the cash.
Any other one? All right, so let's finish this with a big applause to John. Thank you very much. All right. You can ask him later. So, guys, I believe now is lunch time, and after that, we're gonna have. Oh, it's not? Awesome, better. So let's start working, and in a couple of 30 minutes or something. All right. At 1:30, we're gonna have lunch, and then our mentors are going to introduce themselves here for you to understand who are you gonna talk with in the next 5 days. Thank you very much. All right, a big applause. Come on, guys.